Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next session of CME Palooza Spring. My name is Scott Kober, one of the co-producers of CME Palooza. And as we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary, I'd like to welcome you to this session entitled 2024, A Challenging Year for the CME Enterprise. And this session is sponsored by Helio CME and Integrity CE. Our moderator for this session, who will introduce himself shortly, as well as the rest of the panel, is Dean Beals. Dean is the president and CEO of DKB Med. So as with all of our CME Palooza sessions, I would first like to thank our sponsors, our gold sponsors, Haymarket Medical Education, Med Learning Group, and Projects in Knowledge. Our silver sponsors, Academic CME, Clinical Education Alliance, Daiichi Sankyo, DKB Med, Helio CME, Integrity CE, Medscape Education, Platform Q Health Education, and Talem Health. And our bronze sponsors, there are many of these, so be patient. Answers in CME, ActDev, Bonum Continuing Education, CMEology, Excalibur Medical Education, GibLib, Global Education Group, Infograph Ed, Integritas Communications, Iridium Continuing Education, Leading Learning, MedIQ, Paradigm Medical Communications, Partners for Advancing Clinical Education, PriMed, PeerView Institute for Medical Education, Vindigo Medical Education, and Right Medicine. So there are two ways to ask questions during this and all CME Palooza sessions. You can either use the Horizon CME text line to send in a question. The number is 267-6660-CME, that's 0263. Or if you are watching this session in YouTube, you can click on the Watch on YouTube on the lower left-hand corner. You can enter in questions within the YouTube chat function. We will get to as many questions throughout this session as we possibly can. So we will be incorporating an audience response questions during this session. Again, as we do with all of our CME Palooza sessions, you can, if you don't have the Poll Everywhere app, you can download it and join the presentation entitled CME Palooza 005, or you can type in the following URL in your web browser that you can see up here on your screen. Finally, please note that the opinions, discussions, and/or conclusions expressed by our panelists today are those of our panelists and do not represent an endorsement by or a position of their employer, its parent company, or their affiliates. And with that, I am going to turn things over to Dean to get us started.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Scott. First of all, congratulations to you guys on 10 years of CME Palooza. It's hard to believe it's been 10 years. Congratulations to you. That's an amazing achievement. So today's talk is called 2024, A Challenging Year for the CME Enterprise. And we sort of put a question mark next to that. And hopefully over the next hour or so, we'll be able to answer some of those questions. But first, I'd like to introduce myself. Again, my name is Dean Beals. I'm the president and CEO of DKB Med. And I'd like to introduce our panelists, or actually have them introduce themselves. And we'll start with Julie. Julie?
Thanks, Dean. Hi, everyone. My name is Julie White. I'm the director of the Center for Continuing Education at Boston University School of Medicine.
Great. And Michael? Oops, Michael is muted, which is very unlike Michael. All right, you know what? See if we can get that fixed. Oh, now you're unmuted. Now it says you're muted. No, it says you're unmuted. All right, maybe Scott can perhaps help on this, but we'll move over to Pam. So Pam?
Thanks, Bill. Dean, sorry. I'm like, I'm distracted with poor Michael's situation. I'm glad that it's not me. So I'm Pam Mason, and I head up the Medical Education Grants Office at AstraZeneca. I've been doing this quite a while, so I'm very excited to kind of get into this discussion. It's one I think about often. It's kind of what are the challenges for the year that I'm in. So it looks like it's going to be a good discussion.
Michael, are you? Nope, still nothing. So maybe Here you come in again. All right. We'll come back to you. All right. So Michael Lemon, the other Michael, was supposed to join today. Unfortunately, he has a family matter that means that he won't be able to join us. So I'm going to take over his hosting responsibilities, and hopefully our other Michael will be back in just a moment. He was here a while ago, so he'll be back. That said, listen, we have a great panel with three excellent and experienced individuals, none of whom have very strong opinions about anything. There shouldn't be any controversy whatsoever today. But before we get started, we'd like to begin with an ARS question. So Scott, if you can bring up that ARS question. And this is a pretty simple one. We'd just like to know a little bit about who is here. So the question is, where do you represent? Do you come from an academic medical center, an accredited medical education company, a hospital, government, all of the above? And we'll give a moment for that to settle out. And then hopefully Mike will be back with audio and we can have him introduce himself. So let's see here. You are. See, you're back. I knew it would be nothing that would prevent you from speaking, no matter what.
Nothing stops
All
me.
right. So it looks like we're about 40% or thereabouts accredited medical education companies, hospital and healthcare systems, non-industry, and academic medical centers. Kind of a mixed group of folks, which is generally what we find. So Michael, before we move on, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Sure. So apologies for the headset mess up, but I think we're working again. So I'm Mike Riley. I run the med ed department here in Regeneron in beautiful and expensive Sleepy Hollow, New York. Pleased to be here. And one of the things that I just want to say quickly is the title of this talk is about a challenging year in CME. And it occurred to me, I've been doing this kind of officially since the mid 90s. I cannot remember a year that it wasn't challenging for CME. So this is just a variation on a theme to me.
All right. Well, terrific. Thank you, Michael. All right. We can take the survey down. Great. All right. So today's presentation is really going to be divided into three parts, and we're going to spend about 15 minutes if we can keep our panelists to that. And you'll be able to ask questions throughout, and Scott may come back in from time to time to share some of those questions with the panel, and we'll try to address them. So the first part of our presentation is really going to be on the forces that are impacting IME budgets. I've talked with enough people on the provider side as well as the supporter side to know that for many, this has been a challenging year. So the question is this really sort of the ebb and flow of industry support, or is it something more systemic? And that's one of the questions we're going to get at today. So is the Affordable Care Act and its effect on drug pricing having an impact? Are some recent pressures on some supporters around company-led education having an impact? And we'll try to get at some of that today. The second part of our talk is going to be on the impact and promise of technology. While we all love technology, it's great, it does have some challenges. Clearly, it's going to impact our design and our delivery and our access to education. And we can't forget that there is still a digital divide among our learners. Some learners, particularly younger learners, would like to get all of their CME in smaller bites in TikTok or Instagram or short little activities. And other learners prefer longer formats and more traditional formats. So how do we work with that to provide education for all of those learners? And then finally, an issue that has been going on since the beginning of time, and that's sort of assessing the value of what we do, right? How do we collect meaningful data to sort of demonstrate the impact of what it is that we're doing? How do we show that we're changing behaviors and ultimately improving patient outcomes? And sort of this struggle between what providers can do given their time, given their budget, given their capabilities, which are changing, and what supporters are looking to see to support our efforts, because they have to go back to all of their stakeholders, obviously, and demonstrate the success of what it is that we do. So we're going to start with our first talk, or our first discussion on the forces impacting budgets, and I'll ask Scott to bring up a question for us again, and then I'll read it for you. So the question here is, what environmental, market threats, or changes in IME do you feel are adversely impacting IME budgets? So is it around difficulty with outcomes metrics, current or pending legislation, drug pricing, things of that nature. Lack of control, so that speaks to company-led education. Measurement of the return on education, or ROE. All of the above, or none of the above. Everything's great now. So let's give it a moment to wait for those results to come in and see what the group that's watching thinks. And I know we had about 270 or so people on the previous morning panel, so we'll see where we end up here and where we. So pretty much everybody is saying all of the above, and I think that's right. So let's start with a question for our panel, and I'll start with you, Pam. Pam, what do you think are the current headwinds that create challenges within organizations for IME budgets?
Well, I think exactly what was on that question. The Inflation Reduction Act, the passage of that, and the pricing pressures, as well as other challenges that are going on externally. Pharma companies will adapt. I have absolute confidence in the pharmaceutical industry that they will adapt, and they're sort of figuring out different strategies, different approaches to what they were doing. Anything that impacts the entire company like that is going to impact departmental budgets. And the CME, IME, med-ed departments at pharma companies are not immune to that kind of activity that's going on internally and the pressures for those activities. And so everyone, Michael can speak for himself, but I have to fight for my budget every year, just like all the other departments, the ones that are doing medical affairs activities, specific research areas. I mean, we're all sort of putting in our request plans and trying to get support for that. And it goes up and down. It also depends on where the life cycle management of the products that you have in that company. And I've always told folks externally, go to the websites of the companies and really have a true understanding of where their products, therapeutic areas are, where they're doing research. That's going to give you sort of a peek under the curtain to see what the focus for that particular company will be. And so, that's to Michael's point a few minutes ago. I had the company president in the U.S. ask me, "How do you do what you do for so long?" And I said, "Well, I love it. You have to love this work to stay in it." I said, "But there hasn't been a year that has been exactly the same. There's always a different challenge every year. Sometimes they are now rotating through cyclic, but there's sort of a different environment every year that we have to work through."
Terrific, thanks, Pam. Julie, why don't I ask you a similar question? You're faced with different kinds of challenges because you're creating CME activities within your organization, and you're also looking for support outside. What are some of the challenges that you see with IME budgets within your organization and as you apply for grants outside of?
Yeah, it's definitely been a difficult year this past year to get grants. We're working at the same pace, but getting a lot of declines, and probably more declines than I've seen the whole time I've been in CME, which is almost 30 years. I think that what's good that I'm seeing actually is, on the positive side, is that more companies are supporting quality improvement, which we haven't seen that in a long time. And that's a particular strength of ours. So we've been able to get some funding for that, which is really exciting. But the more traditional sort of enduring materials, tough, really tough. Yeah.
Michael, what about you? How have you seen the challenges to IME budgets within your organization?
Well, I mean exactly what Pam said, right? We have to defend the budget on a very routine basis. I mean, that is at least 50% of our job on this team, because we have a mission, and the mission needs resources in order to carry it through, and those resources are dollars. So we have to defend the money. But the reality is, the company is a for-profit company, and these budgets are set at levels 20 steps above me. I don't have much say in what we really get. We defend as best as we can and prove our value as routinely as we possibly can, and that helps us. So,
do you find that budgets go up and down in particular areas, or do you
Oh.
see an overall, cut, do they say, from year to year?
it's both. It's both. It's going to depend upon the therapeutic area. I mean, markets fluctuate, right? The therapeutic areas fluctuate. Different competitors come in and come out. Pam's waving her. Oh, she's turning her lights on.
Sorry, I'm sitting in a conference room. I guess I wasn't moving enough.
A carbon appropriate.
Saying something.
That would not be unexpected, Mike. Just so you
Yeah,
know.
no. So I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? If a therapeutic area is going to be affected by one of our, emerging products, there's going to be money because education needs to happen. If that product is a me too, and education has been happening in MOAs and pharmacokinetics for a decade, there's not much point in educating on stuff that's the universe knows about. So it varies. There's a lot of strategy that goes into putting the dollars in the right place and defending those dollars and getting the dollars in the first place.
Right. Okay. Thanks. All right. So let's move on to a related topic, but not exactly that. So the players have been changing in IME over the last couple of years. There have been a number of investment groups that have acquired a number of medical education companies. Pam, what impact do you think that has on the CME landscape?
Well, my biggest concern is that it becomes more about the money and less about the quality education. And thinking about patients and healthcare providers and what they really need to know and practice, right? And so with that as a driving force, I think we all need to be careful and watchful to see what we can do to kind of avoid that sort of behavior. It's hard to know. I mean, it's not just the investment company. I mean, you have other groups starting to come into our world. I mean, I haven't seen anything supported by Amazon, but I wouldn't be surprised. And the other thing that's very complicated is that sort of this merger of groups, someone buys a large pharmaceutical network, right? And they may, they become ineligible according to the definition of ACCME. I mean, so it's getting more and more complicated in terms of who the players are. Sometimes you might find a player in the space that you're not quite sure what to do with, right? So that's my biggest concern is money.
I've heard from several supporters that sometimes they get the exact same proposal from different arms of the same organization, which is a little. Mike, do you want to talk to some of your concerns with what's going on?
Well, yeah, I mean, the VCs come in, they buy these organizations, and they have a margin expectation on the back end, right? They spend whatever it is they have spent, and now they need to recoup their money and either turn a profit or show enough margin so that they can turn around and sell those companies again to somebody else. And Pam's right. We see a decline in the quality of those grants because these organizations have to churn the grants out. And, my team reads these grants, beginning to end. It takes a lot of time. And we find a lot of quality issues in the grants where things are cut and pasted and the information is wrong or it's old. And, we can't, what are we going to do? Right. So we can't fund those things. And so it hurts all of us because, it's the quality of the grant and then the belief that if the grant is really solid in writing, can the organization actually pull it off, right? Because some of these things are very robust and very hard to execute on. So it's a concern.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add on to what Michael's saying, that is the other piece of it that we're noticing. The big promises of what they're going to be able to capture and gain from an outcome standpoint, and then they don't really deliver, or what they deliver is not quite what they portrayed it to be up front, right? And so what do you do with this? And some of these are very large, well-known groups, and we just kind of have to figure out how that's going to settle out. There is some movement again, it looks like, companies and downsizing and ups. We hear, somebody's hiring, somebody's downsizing. So it gets complicated in that respect as well.
Yeah. So Dean, what Pam and I are telling you is don't sell.
Right.
That
Note
would
to
make
self.
my life easier. Yeah, don't sell.
Note to self. Don't sell. Note to self. So Julie, forget about it. We're not going. We were going to merge, but apparently it's over. So Julie, from your perspective, because you're a smaller shop, you're not a big giant organization with multi-prongs. How does this affect you? How does this sort of merging?
I got to say, Michael took the words out of my mouth, because Dean, you are the founder of your company. As far as I know, you still own your company. Please don't sell. Because I was really going to say that, because we've collaborated with a handful of really great medical education companies over the years, and it's been a wonderful partnerships, because 1 and 1 equals more than 2, right? And they can bring things to the project that we can't do by ourselves, or vice versa. But I find that what's missing when the person, and I've been doing this so long, I knew many of the people that founded these companies, right? And then when they sell, it's like that human factor is missing. It's like, the reason they started the companies were because, yes, they wanted to generate revenue, but they had a belief in the product and what they were doing, and what, it was all really about the education. And I miss that. I feel like some of that kind of, it's not there in many cases. So that's where I think there's a potential downside that we have to be careful about.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. There are different incentives, right? When you are now owned by a larger company. Scott, do you have a question for us?
So there are a couple questions that have come in through the Horizon CME text line, and the first question, it kind of speaks to the audience of CME Palooza. I mean, we all talk. I mean, everyone on this panel and most of our panels have been around for a while, but we have some, very newcomers to the world. So our first question. And Dean, I'm sure anybody can take this. What is IME?
We've been. I think all the people on this call have been trying to figure this out for about 40 years now. Sure, go ahead, Pam.
I'll take that one. So what IME? You'll hear a lot of IME discussion comes from industry. And the reason is because it's independent medical education, and that's defined for us by the FDA 1997 guidance. And in that document, it talks about independent, and it talks about company directed, owned, driven, whatever word you want to use, promotional activities. And there are only 2 buckets sort of that industry can operate in. And that's where IME. So I use it because some things may not be accredited, but we look at them the same way as if they're independent, or they're a medical sponsorship that's an initiative that's independent. So it's going to happen with or without my company. Then we look at it and using sort of the same criteria we use to evaluate accredited CME.
Okay, great.
Right.
So
that actually, can I just segue to one other thing, because I think that's a perfect segue, and then we'll come back with your last question, Scott, or the next question. So IME, and then there's something called company-led education. I think that feeds really well into that. So company-led education, for those of you that don't know what that is education that is run and managed by typically pharmaceutical companies, manufacturers, where they are responsible for the content. So it's not independent. It is 100% led by a company. And lately, in some organizations, there has been a resurgence, for lack of a better word, of company-led education, or at least a perception that company-led education is perhaps even taking some budgets from IME. We've heard about this at least in 2 or 3 cases that I'm aware of. So I'll reach out to you, Michael. Has that been something that you've noticed within your organization? And if so, how do you combat that? Because ultimately there's only a set pot of money and you want to try to get as much as you can to do IME.
Yeah, I mean, there are annual budgets, and at some point that number is fixed, right, at a very high level. So there is only so much money to go around. Company led is perceived internally as something that is a controllable message. So it gets a lot of support because the organization gets to say what they want in legal parameters. And they feel that the bang for the buck is stronger, as opposed to med ed, where we are writing an unrestricted educational grant, and faculty can say whatever faculty want, good, bad, or indifferent. That said, yeah, we see it, but because we've taken a very different approach at Regeneron in that we stand on the important part of what we do. And what we do is not just educate, but it's collect data. And when we collect the data, we also generate insights, off of that data that we then feed back to the organization. Company-led cannot do that. Company-led is a show, right? They drop the fruit cup and it's over, like we used to do in CME many, many years ago. We've done much, much more here, and I believe that's probably rolling out across pharma. So I think that we have a lot of benefit. Company-led does not. That being said, of course it's there. It's been there. I used to write company-led education at Merck many, many years ago. So it's been there. So it's just, again, nothing new.
Yeah.
Pam, how do you make the case internally? Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think there's a resurgence of company-led. I think it's just sudden appreciation that it exists in our world, right? Yeah. That the companies and the medical education companies and the organizations that we work with, to support IME, CME, that they're suddenly it's come to their attention, right? Because it's being kind of discussed more. But very similar to what Michael's talking about. I mean, we sort of hang our hat on quality education that we support, and that we get data at the end of that. And we do what we can to kind of feed that back into the organization so that my company can make more informed decisions about things. The challenge with company-led, and it's not that the company necessarily has to create that content. They could hire a third party to do it for them. And so we do consults, just to add a little bit about that. We do consults internally where I say, but you still have your hands all over it. You're directing what they are going to do and what the message is, to Michael's point. So that's not independent. You can't throw your hands up and say, but I didn't do anything with that program. Yeah, you did. But the challenge for company-led is that healthcare providers aren't going to flock to company-led education unless there's something specific they need to know, and only the company's going to have that information, right? So we're notorious for building websites and programs and all this stuff, but the numbers, and so this is the plug for our universe, the numbers never reach the numbers that we do in the independent med ed space. They can't. They don't.
Yeah.
And so anybody that tells you they can, be a little suspect, because it's difficult to get those numbers.
Yeah.
And also, correct me if I'm wrong, they're not measuring the outcomes of these programs in the way that we are. They're
not
measuring.
The way we are, yeah, but they are getting more sophisticated. Let's put that out there. They are getting more sophisticated because you have, as you mentioned, their parent companies now who have an arm for medical affairs and have an arm for, it's always dangerous when I start talking with my hands. Sorry, guys. An arm for IME, CME, the accredited piece, right? And so with that, they're learning just like we've been learning and evolving all these years, they are as well internally.
Okay.
So
Thank you. Scott, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so Dean, we've got about 300 people watching this session, and we've had a lot of
Wonderful.
questions coming in. So we're going to get to some of them. Let me throw
Okay,
one
go
question
ahead.
that came in on the Horizon CME text line. This kind of backtracks a little bit to what Pam, you and Mike were talking about. Given the complexities of the medical education company landscape, do you plan to increase the funding provided to medical schools and academic medical centers, which has been declining in previous years per ACCME data?
Pay attention, Julie.
Yeah, I'm happy. I have to say, I have to tell everybody, Julie has always been one of my very favorite people because she submitted a grant to me, I don't know, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it was, a QI project. She was my very first QI project that I funded at AstraZeneca. So just to put that out there. So back to the question. It's you're right. There is a shift that's going on right now. I'm not sure why. I actually was talking to the ACCME about it because it is one of the things that I track, and we try to have a split. So we track that kind of information. But it used to be a third med ed companies, a third academic institutions, hospital, healthcare systems, everything you want to put in that bucket, and then a third that were associations, specialty societies, that piece. And it's shifted a bit where the med ed companies are probably closer to 50% now of the budget. But some of that has to do with they have very skilled, proposal writers and sort of the resources behind them to support more complicated activities. Now, the one thing that our tracking doesn't pick up and ACCME does not pick up is collaboration, which is exactly what Julie referred to before. A lot of these med ed companies, because they don't have patients, they don't have patient level data. They don't have the actual healthcare providers in their system, right? They may have their lists and they join and that sort of thing, but they don't have patient data. And they need Julie to get to that level of data. And so, I've mentioned it to the ACCME that they should track the collaborative efforts that are going on. A lot of times the med ed company has it because they have more resources for the logistics part. But we're doing implementation science, we're doing quality improvement, all the sort of buzz areas. That's what we're looking to do. And that takes the collaborative effort because one group does not necessarily have all the pieces to a project like that.
Okay. In the interest of time, we could talk about this for the entire hour, but in the interest of time, I am going to move on to our next topic. And that, if Scott, you could bring up the ARS question. So this is really the impact and promise of technology. So how do advances in technology keep you up at night? So is it complicated to comply with accreditation requirements? Sort of developing an expertise in all these new technologies, from AI to social media, fear of failure from experimentation, protecting learners' data, all of the above or none, you're sleeping like a baby. And if so, you need to tell me what you're doing. All right, interesting. All right. So really about the expertise, developing expertise, a little bit on protecting learner data, but also first of all, I want to know who those 15% of people are who are not worried about any of this stuff and sleep well at night. But clearly developing expertise and all of the above seems to be. So I'm going to switch it over to Julie at this point. So Julie, have you experimented at all within your shop on artificial intelligence, AI, and how it is impacting your ability to either create, do, influence CME? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes, so I think in the beginning, the thing we were experimenting with the most is titles for grants, right? So just in full disclosure, probably the last 10 titles we've generated were with assistance from ChatGPT. Because instead of having to bring a group of people together to brainstorm, you can plug something in and get some great ideas. Also, we're trying as a team to just become comfortable with the technology, and at this point we're just experimenting with it, having fun. But I will say what's really great is some efficiencies that you can use it for. For example, we did a survey we have a pretty big database, like 115,000 primary care, and we surveyed them on the topic of obesity, whether or not they wanted education on this. And the comments we got were voluminous, 20, 30, 40 pages. So we used chat to kind of cull it and organize it and put it in themes. We had to run it through many times. I will say with everything with AI, you have to check. Because we have a fair number of pediatricians in there, I felt like that got skewed a little bit towards pediatrics, maybe less than was, so you still have to do, as with everything with AI, you have to use the human touch. So we're also trying to figure out how to incorporate it, how to make sure we're supporting our learners with the, around AI, like what do they need to know? How's it impacting healthcare? So not just ourselves and CME or CE, but healthcare, and sort of at least be along for the ride.
Okay. Michael, have you seen either grants with AI components in them, or have you seen grants that you felt, this needs assessment wasn't written by a human being?
Well, I don't think many of our needs assessments are written by human beings as I think back on them, because yeah, I mean, you can pretty much tell if it's a digital needs assessment or not, because the language isn't right, and that's part of the caution that I put out there with AI is, it might be a cool tool, but it's not ready for prime time. So we just have to be very, very careful with it. And I don't think we can put more than 2 people in a room without AI coming up as a conversational topic. It's it's just ubiquitous at this point. I will plug Karen Ruiz Cordell's talk a little later today. I think she's talking at noon, and she's doing a whole thing about AI. So she's really the expert on my team.
Okay, excellent. All right. So Pam, how do you see advances in technology, whether it be AI or other simulations, things of that nature, impacting activity formats? Have you seen a lot of interesting new formats in grants that you've received? And if so, how has technology sort of played into that?
I don't know that I've noticed different technologies with the AI, but what I've heard is that obviously needs assessments been one thing that it's focused on. And I think even from an internal standpoint, from me and other companies have been talking about or looking at needs assessments ourselves, because we do what we call environmental scans to better understand, especially in emerging areas where we aren't experts yet. We reach out into the universe to figure out, and AI, I think, would be an incredible tool to be able to do that. I mean, it's amazing what you can find on Google. So I think to enhance that would be great. I've also proposal writing. I think I know that a while back I got someone I knew who was using AI. I said, well, let me know if you ever submit a grant application to us to consider. I'm not going to tell my team. I wanted to see if they can tell the difference. And I think it was like 90% written by AI, right? With an oversight, obviously. My team didn't notice the difference, right? Which I see as, and somebody wanted me to put a question on, well, how much of this is AI? I said, who cares? They're going to be using AI. I'm going to be using AI. So, it's going to be a wash. But to Michael's point, it's really, truly, you have to watch what you get out of there. So I talk about it internally as being augmenting my human team. It's a tool for us. We're looking at how can it help us with screening and matching to strategy and some other things that I think AI can be very clever at, and help us as a tool. But I don't see it replacing the human at the moment, because it's too vulnerable to making up things, and it's like a human
As
who
we
gets back in
know.
the corner and creates a universe for itself.
Yeah,
my-
early
my
on we
concern-
go ahead,
go ahead,
Michael.
Dean.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I would just say early on, this is just an anecdote. Early on, we kind of played with doing a needs assessment or two, and we found that most of the references were made up.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you really have to be careful with using it, certainly for a needs assessment. And our medical director was very happy because she knew she had a job for at least a couple more years. AI has not replaced her yet. Yeah, go ahead, Michael. What were you
But
gonna
I
say?
think that we also have to realize that AI gets better every time it does something.
No
And
question.
it is doing something 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And there are many, many, many more platforms than just ChatGPT. Right? So at some point in the relatively near future, it could start replacing us and do a very good job, a better job than what humans do. And that is the danger, right? So I'm not trying to be Chicken Little and scream that the sky is falling, but it's something that we do have to, let's not be ignorant of the possibility of it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and just to add, I mean, that's one thing that has come up and we've talked about. At this point, there are other things that go into our decision making. So we're not looking at it to make decisions for us by any means. I mean, budget, competitive, whether a provider has been able to do what they said they could do, et cetera, et cetera. Other things go into the actual decision. And so we don't see it replacing that piece right now. It's just augmenting as a tool. But I have to say, it's very interesting. I got an email today. I don't even know who it was from, talking about AI, generative AI, working with their medical writers, and they had reduced costs by 35% and reduced timelines by half. Those kinds of numbers are going to get anybody's attention, whether it be on the industry side from a supporter or on the provider, education provider side.
Dean, can I just insert something, though, that I think is really important? And actually, you might have been going to ask this about some of the risks and challenges, but I think something we all need to keep in mind is that the data that's in these giant databases, or, whatever you call the whole AI universe, is missing a lot from, for example, people of color, women, et cetera. It's only looking at data for the data that's put in. So we always have to keep that in mind, I think, when we're writing needs assessments, is what are we missing? Or when we're doing research as scientists, what are we missing? So I hope we as an industry don't forget that.
Yeah, there's no quality control on this data, right? It's just data being put into a giant database and spitting stuff back at us. So I think I hear your point, Michael. I think at some point in the future, this may be a threat, but I think now, without the human hand involved in every single part of this, yes, is it great for generating titles? Not that we've ever done this, Julie, but it's great for generating titles.
But
programs.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would encourage everybody, and Michael, in case you missed that point, everybody on this call needs to embrace AI.
No question.
Embrace it, because otherwise someone's going to tell you what to do with it. And it's better if you can help shape it and figure out how to use it as a tool.
Yeah, we do embrace it, Pam, because Karen uses it in natural language processing on a daily basis to analyze the data that we receive.
Right.
So, we do use it.
Yep.
We just know its limitations.
Yep. And I think that's what everybody has to understand. There are limitations.
Absolutely.
But we do need to embrace it. Don't turn a blind eye and think it's going to go away.
No.
This is not.
It's not going away. It's not going away. So let's stay on this for a little bit, and then I want to get on to our third topic. But I want to talk a little bit about technologies beyond AI, right? So there are all these new formats, right? You've got TikTok, assuming it's alive in a year from now or 9 months from now. You've got Instagram. You've got other short formats. Yet you have learners who want longer formats, along with learners that want shorter formats, particularly depending on the generational divide between those learners. Julie, how do you, as a provider of medical education, deal with all of those competing needs?
Yeah, I might turn that one back to you, Dean.
Wow, that was dramatic. That was dramatic. I like that.
No, we talk about it a lot. I mean, one of the areas, so we work a lot with our pharmacy department, and many of them are, huge on Twitter/X, right? And we thought, well, can we do some education on Twitter? And this was before the CME came out with their policy, and we struggled with how to keep it compliant, how to engage an audience. And we do work with a medical education company that's pretty strong in that area. So we decided, you know what, I don't think this is for us as a med school to start to do this on our own. So we're partnering with them and learning, which is really interesting. But I don't know, we talk about it a lot. I will say that I don't think we're particularly the innovators. We're not at the front of the curve on this one. So let me ask you, Dean, how do you, as a med ed company?
Yeah, I think we recognize that different learners have different needs. For example, we just started doing some work in Japan, right? Forget about the translation issues for the moment. Japanese learners, 15-minute activities, 10 to 15-minute max. They don't want an hour-long activity. We've been told multiple times, no. So we then need to take what we've done for other learners and translate that not only from a language point of view, but also from a learning format point of view. So I think you need to be very clear about what your learners want, and this adds cost and time. You need to create things in multiple ways, right? You need to create things for a group of learners that might want shorter activities. You need to create things for a group of learners that might want longer activities. And I think that's one of the big challenges that we face over the coming years as we embrace different kinds of formats with greater speed, honestly. I mean, I don't know how you get around the accreditation issues of TikTok and Twitter and all these different platforms. I think we have to work with the accredited providers to help that. Mike, have you supported any activities that have included just out there kinds of learning formats like TikTok or Instagram or Twitter or things of that nature, as not as a promotional component, but more as a core educational delivery format?
No, we haven't. No, I mean, we explored it, but keep in mind that, part of our mantra is changing behavior for the better. And it's really very hard to do that with a very short format. Right? I mean, that's a clinical pearl, get in, get out, done. So if we're going to do that, then it has to be part of a curriculum. It's not just a single one-off that, lives for 15 minutes on social media. That, to my knowledge, I don't think my team has done anything like that, but we've done series of other new instructional design components. I found it interesting that your survey showed that there was concern that innovation may fail, and our belief is innovation is a good thing. It's an experiment. Experiments fail. That's how you learn. So of course, we try new things all the time.
Right. Pam, were you going to say something? No.
We do support different social media formats. It's been pretty successful in that respect. But to Michael's point, we understand the limitations of it.
Yep.
And kind of what it brings to the table. But I'm a firm believer that knowledge is not a bad thing, and so you have to build on that knowledge to get to other outcomes eventually. And so we do support different formats. We're always looking for something interesting or creative. And I think it's a real challenge because I think the younger generation of healthcare providers, even more so. I mean, the whole pandemic, I think that brought that out in a lot of people. But even with that, I mean, I was blown away a year or so ago when I heard the lecture, and what med students were doing. They weren't really going to classes. They were just looking up the information they needed to know for whatever was the next thing they had to do. And so that whole generation, I think, is small snippets of information and the smaller. So it's interesting about Japan. So I'll be interested to hear, Dean, your experience later on about that.
Yeah.
Pam,
Yeah.
Pam,
It's
Pam,
Go
you
ahead,
fired a
Mike.
synapse on me in that while we didn't use social media as a platform for education specifically, we did use social media very extensively for our COVID campaign back during the pandemic. So we would utilize social media to let the public and HCPs know that educational programs were available, that then directed them to a landing page. So it's all part of how you use it, right? What is the most effective way to use it? So.
Yeah, we use it all the time in that regard as well. We use it with social media influencers to drive participation. We use it to our patient education, but it's been challenging in my mind to actually use it for the actual education itself, accredited education, if you will.
Right.
All right, I want to move on. We only have a few minutes left. I do want to move on to our last topic. So I'll ask Scott to bring up our last ARS question. We probably haven't left enough time for this, but there you go. So this is all about assessing the value of what we do. So is the problem with demonstrating meaningful impact of our activities about better instructional design, the cost and time of using either QI or EHR or claims data, higher level outcome survey fatigue, regulatory concerns regarding patient data, or all of the above? Give it a minute to settle down. Looks like all of the above is the clear winner in this one so far. I don't want to waste too much time because I do want the panel to talk on this. We only have about 9 or so minutes left. So lots of survey fatigue as well. Big surprise. So Julie, I'll start with you. How do we provide meaningful outcomes to meet the demands of greater reporting requirements that are all being placed on us with essentially, shrinking or flat dollars?
Right. Yeah, I think it's really tough because, right, QI or EHR data, claims data is the gold standard, but it doesn't apply to every activity, and you can't always get that data. And it's expensive sometimes to try to get that data. And then I think, I don't know, I feel like we need to be creative. One of the things we've tried doing a little bit more of is focus groups, for example. So it's quality, not quantity. You dig deeper into what the experience has been of the learners rather than trying to survey everyone. I do think survey fatigue is a big issue, getting responses. If anyone out there has been able to get a high percentage of return on post-activity follow-up questions about whether you make changes in practice, please tell me your secrets. We do get responses, but it's not a voluminous amount. So I don't know, it's a struggle. We completely, at our shop anyway, I completely understand why Pam and Michael need that data, be able to defend your budgets, to be able to say, look what we paid for this, and this is what was accomplished. So we get that. But it's expensive to try to get robust, high-level statistical information on the data that we have. So I don't have the answers.
Pam, do you think the days of doing a continuing medical education activity with level 1 through 4 or 5 subjective CME outcomes are doomed? Do you think that's going to be a thing of the past, or do you think that's going to be here for a long time?
I think, like I said, I'm a big proponent for knowledge. So, you have to have knowledge to build on anything else. So I don't think it's doomed. I think we just have to put it in perspective. But it's, what gnaws at me, and the question I get asked is, why are we doing this? Are we really making a difference? Are we moving that needle and actually improving patient care? And, to Julie's point, the only way to know that is to get that data on see where the patients are falling out, or where the physicians or the other healthcare providers may have changed their practice. It's probably not a secret to anyone that I don't really like the question, do you intend to change? To me, I don't know an individual that would ever say, no, they do not intend to change something. And so I don't think that gives us any information. So I'd like to do away with that and really actually try to get at, are they just fatigue, because I am. I'm so, there's the lights going again. Sorry. I get tired of answering surveys myself. Everybody wants to know. You take a flight and they ask you for a survey. So I don't know, Michael, do you have a kind of a better, you have a, Karen especially, who really is looking at outcomes and what they're doing and being successful.
We obviously, there will always be level 3, level 4, et cetera, depending on what you're educating on. Julie's absolutely right that that will always be necessary. Knowledge is critical. Knowledge is the basis of what it is that we as an organization, as an industry do. That said, just because a physician or a nurse or a pharmacist says they know what to do doesn't mean that they can or will. And so it's really about really moving the needle. I mean, so what that you should make your bed in the morning. I know I should make my bed in the morning, and I intend to make my bed in the morning, but every night when I go home, it's a mess. So you're right. Intent to change it's one of those worthless things for us. And it comes down to, this circles back to defending the budget. If we can prove our value by showing an improvement in patient care, as we've done with you, Dean, multiple times, we've improved patient care, doesn't mean we sold drug. It means that we've improved care, depending on what you're measuring, right? Measuring against clinical guidelines, something like that. That is a huge win for us, because we've always said for how many decades now that med ed is so critically important, but we've never been able to prove it. Now, with the new technologies, the advent of claims-based and access to EHR, et cetera, it gives us that opportunity to show that the education really did impact physician behavior. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I got myself.
Pam and Michael, do you see the balance shifting? And what I mean by that is, do you see more money going toward sort of higher level EHR claims-based kinds of things? Not saying that we don't need to do knowledge-based education, but if that's the thing that's going to resonate, and we know it is, with the people you need to talk to, you can't talk to them about Moore's level; they'll throw you out of the room. Do you see the balance shifting as that becomes a bigger part of the mix, or do you see the balance remaining around the same?
Quick answers.
I see it remaining the same. It's really dependent on it's contextual on the grant and the therapeutic area, right? You can't do it all the time. You can only do it every now and then. Pam?
Ditto.
Excellent.
Great.
All right. I knew we wouldn't have enough time for all of this, so thanks, Scott.
Well, thank you guys all. And you guys touched on so many things that are part of sessions that are coming later today, have been part of sessions in the past, certainly will be part of sessions in the future for CME Palooza. So we talked a lot about surveys, survey fatigue. We have a CME Palooza survey. As you're watching, if you want to click the survey link at the bottom of our live page, this gets a sense of who's watching CME Palooza, what sessions you're watching, what sessions you might be interested, what topics you might be interested in learning about in the future. And finally, for those of you who are viewing this live, we will be starting our next session here in less than 1 minute. So no need to refresh your browser, just look on our live page and click the appropriate session link. It will start shortly. With that, I'd like to thank Dean and Julie and Michael and Pam for joining us, and we will see everyone soon.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.